Hey, good evening, everyone. From our studios here in Minneapolis, this is another edition of Bright Lights. I'm your host, Lacey Johnson, where each week we bring to you a host of guests who share their life of achievements, talk about their commitment, their habits, their behaviors, their sacrifice to get where they got and share that with you as a bright light for you. So, welcome. This week, our guest is going to be Greg Urban. Greg is a business owner and he's a politician also here in the Twin Cities and downtown Minneapolis and across the country. And we're going to get into different areas of the impact that recent events have had on his small business here in Minneapolis, the George Floyd protests and violence that followed with that, the whole COVID 19 restrictions. And we're going to talk about Governor Walz's emergency powers and how that was used. And as always, we will talk solutions. I'm one of those people who do not like to just focus on issues, which we do. In engineering, I tell everybody we spend about 5% of the time defining a problem and about 95% of the time solving the problems. Out in the world, it seemed to be a little different. People spend 95% of the time talking about issues and problems and the same issues they talk about for decades, and no one hardly ever talks solutions. So we like to talk solutions here also. I was telling someone another wonderful weather day here in Minneapolis. I don't think we've ever had any rain or bad weather on my Wednesday during my Wednesday show. We've had some heat and high humidity, but we can live with that. So thankful for the weather. And once again, just been a great week here for me and my family and the community here. So without further ado, we're going to talk about the business climate here and impact on small businesses. And, we're going to touch on a whole lot of subjects that's been in the news recently. Like I mentioned earlier, the governor's emergency powers, the shutdown and different impact on businesses. We're going to talk about some recent events of violence. I think there was like 10 people shot down at the Monarch nightclub. We're going to get into that because our guest is very familiar with that environment. And so we're going to talk to him about it. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mr. Greg Urban to Bright Lights. Hey, good evening, Greg, and welcome to Bright Lights.
How you doing? Thanks for having me here on this beautiful Wednesday evening.
Yes. So Greg, I built you up here. You're going to help us dive into a whole lot of issues that's recently been in the news. But before we go there, give us a little biographical background on Greg Urban, where he's from, childhood influences, what led to his educational career choices, those type of things. Just spend a little time introducing yourself to our audience here.
Sure. Yeah, I'm from Vadnais Heights, a lifelong resident. About 7 minutes from St. Paul, about 13 minutes from Minneapolis. So beautiful suburb here, just northeast of town. But we can get to a Twins game real quick. And so great little city we have up here. Growing up, my family owned a bunch of the last farmland in our city. So here in Vadnais Heights, we grew some of the best peppers and the best celery in the state. So a lot of hard work, but good times and trips down to the Minneapolis and St. Paul Farmers Market. If you've never, I'm sure you've been.
Yes,
sure
I have.
Some great produce. We get there early, and the best stuff goes early. So, went to White Bear High School, a graduate of White Bear High School, so always local, and started a landscaping business when I was 16 and turned that into a good-sized site work company doing work around the state and the Midwest with about 40 employees. We're down cleaning up the oil spills down in Pensacola, Florida, a number of years ago, and I liked it so much. I went back and visited and opened up a bar nightclub down there, and now I have 4, including one downtown Minneapolis. But work hard, play hard, I guess, is kind of the theme of my life.
I like that. Where we're from, that's exactly what we did also. So I can identify with that. By the way,
Yeah.
just quickly, the peppers and celeries that your family used to provide for the St. Paul Farmers Market, who's providing those peppers and celeries nowadays?
Well, my mom and dad, they're still down. They can
Oh,
be
yeah. Okay.
found. They can be found down in St. Paul every Friday and Saturday. So I travel out of town to my businesses most weekends, so I don't make it down as much as I like. But they're still bringing them down there. So great
Okay.
great place to spend a Saturday or Sunday morning.
Well, I guarantee you that me and my wife is going to go over to the St. Paul Farmers Market one Saturday morning, and we're going to look for some celery and peppers. And when we find them, we're going to have a pretty good idea of who's selling them. So I appreciate
There you
that.
go.
So
Excellent.
you mentioned your site work business and going down to Pensacola, Florida with the oil spill, and then you like this place and you ventured off into the bar and restaurant kind of business. And you mentioned you had 4 of them. I know one is in Minneapolis. Where are I know you got one in Pensacola. Where are the other 2 at, Greg?
Yep. So we got one in Lakeland, Florida, halfway between Orlando and Tampa. A little bit warmer down there, which is nice for the middle of the winter. And I have my newest location that's 6 weeks old in Austin, Texas, on the world famous 6th Street.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, let's dive into your business, and especially as it relates to the city of Minneapolis. And I have spoken to you before to let our audience know that because I'm interested in small businesses and what has happened to businesses here in the Twin Cities. I've visited Lake Street. I visited University Avenue, talked to those business owners, and I understand the pain and suffering that they're going through. And I've been talking to you as someone from downtown Minneapolis and understanding the pain and suffer, unnecessary, a lot of it that you're going through. So let's talk about that a little bit. But first, you got a bar downtown, and what's the name of it, Greg, and where is it located?
Wild Greg's Saloon on First Avenue, right
Okay.
down in the heart of the warehouse district.
Okay, and tell our audience, Greg, the impact that recent events, let's say within the past year of the George Floyd situation, that's been a little over a year, and the COVID shutdown and all the rules and regulations, how have those things impacted your bar downtown Minneapolis?
Well, it's been devastating to the industry, not just my bar, but the industry, and Minneapolis in particular was the hardest hit because the whole state was shut down in March of 2020. But then Minneapolis, of course, had the riots in May. Now the bars and restaurants were all still shut down then, but unfortunately the riots weren't too inviting for people to come back to Minneapolis. And obviously Minneapolis thrives. It needs people to come in from the suburbs. That's the idea, how a city and a suburb work together. You need people from the suburbs to come in, go see a Twins game, a Timberwolves game, whatever it may be. But the riots did not look good for the city. And immediately after the riots, there was a spike in crime that had followed that, which was troubling. But then in Minneapolis, in particular, then once we got to July, Minneapolis shut all its bars and restaurants back down. The state didn't. They did in November. But Minneapolis bars and restaurants, the ones that were already having to deal with the crime and the other issues, they got shut down earlier than that. And then they were all shut down until, I think, February or so. But of course, when we were technically allowed to reopen, that was when the Chauvin trial was going on. And anybody that went downtown during the Chauvin trial knows it looked kind of like a military base down there, the razor wire and Humvees and everything else. So while it certainly provided safety and security for downtown, it wasn't exactly inviting either. So we had to wait a couple more months. We made a decision that we were going to wait to reopen until that was over because we didn't know what was going to happen after the trial verdict either. Mm-hmm. So fortunately, it was a peaceful ending to it. And that was a good thing, certainly, but just the trial and the logistics behind it kept us and many other businesses downtown closed for probably a couple more months than the rest of the state, after being closed 4 months before the rest of the state by the city.
Mm-hmm. So, what was the official or unofficial rationale that the city of Minneapolis used to keep you closed and shut down? What were they? I mean, given that if you were in a lot of other cities throughout the state, you were able to open. What was the Minneapolis rationale for keeping you closed?
In Minneapolis, they think the government's your mother, basically. It's one of those Big Brother, I guess, maybe. I don't think there was a good rationale. I think it was political theater. It's it just didn't make any sense. You could drive anytime last year since May of 2020, 1 year before Minnesota was fully reopened. You could drive to Hudson, Wisconsin any day, and the bars would be packed. The parking lots would all be Minnesota plates, and there was no problems in Hudson, Wisconsin, or Wisconsin in general. So there was never logic behind it. I mean, it was clear, using the Florida examples last year, that the lockdowns did not work. It was political theater. I can't think of any reason that made any sense. But in particular, there was such damaging effects of the lockdowns. Now, obviously, they extended well beyond businesses. I mean, you look at the drug problems people had, the mental health issues. People weren't meant to be locked down. Some people said it was kind of close to house arrest, that what they were doing to people. But I don't think it made a lot of sense, and there certainly was a lot of damage done for the little bit of sense it may have made.
So you are a good person to provide evidence of the different policies and outcomes in Minneapolis versus Austin, Texas, or versus Pensacola, Florida, or I think you said Lakeland, Florida. Why don't you compare what was going on in Florida and Texas and the results there versus what was going on here in Minneapolis and the results here, especially on business and just the overall cities? Give us some type of comparison based upon your knowledge and personal experience.
Let me give you an example. I'd go down to Florida. I'd have a sold out full capacity concert last summer. I'd get on a plane. I'd come back here, and you couldn't go in McDonald's and order a cheeseburger. So, I mean, it was night and day difference. I mean, Florida was open. It was open for business. It was just everything was normal. And, here they were preaching fear, and they were not looking at the collateral damage of what they were doing. They'd say, well, hey, we might have saved a life due to COVID. And that's great. Every life is important. But unfortunately, when you have suicide spiking, drug use spiking, and everything else, how many other lives are being lost? They took 2 years of education away from the kids in doing that. What's that worth?
Yeah.
So, but Florida was open. Texas, to a lesser extent, was open. And it was just a night and day difference in how it was approached.
So I am assuming, Greg, that being the involved person that you are, that you had some communication with the city officials here in Minneapolis. Tell us a little bit about that and the issues you brought up and what type of responses you got from the city of Minneapolis.
When it came to the COVID issues, there was nothing to negotiate with them. They made their minds up, and it was a political theater matter, posturing. There was nothing to negotiate. They said, we're shutting you down, and we don't know when you're going to open back up. But I will say they kept sending invoices for license fees and things like that. not to mention property taxes and all that. But and I'd say send them an email, say, you guys got quite a bit of money from the feds. How about giving some of that out to the businesses in Minneapolis who've been damaged far beyond everybody? And they'd say, well, the state just gave some money out. I'd say, I know the state did, but don't you think Minneapolis had a little bit tougher than the rest of the state? And so there was no concern for the businesses, and that's not unusual in Minneapolis. It really hasn't been. I mean, it's a tough city to operate in. It really is, and it is really unfortunate that it is.
Well, a couple of things. You mentioned that the city gets its money a lot of time from businesses and people who make money. I mean, if you're not working, you can't pay taxes and things like that. So how do they justify that in their own mind? Do they not realize that the money to support their budget to a large extent come from successful businesses?
That's one of those common sense issues, and unfortunately, in that city, common sense doesn't tend to go very far. It just you need revenue to fund a city, and there's an apparent disconnect there. And with the amount of federal money that they've been receiving, maybe that's how they've been able to get by with that. But I would assume at some point the free ride is going to be over, and they had better hope that there's a business environment that can allow businesses to thrive and pay taxes when that happens.
Right. So I also kind of understand that when you were allowed to open, that there was some harassment from the licensing department and places like that. Do I have that understanding correct? And city organizations?
There's some tough cookies in that town. Let me tell you, there's some tough cookies. They pick on their businesses. They really do. If an Uber drops somebody off somewhere that the city deems inappropriate, and the person gets out and comes in your business, well, apparently you're responsible for that Uber, I guess. It's troubling. It's troubling when you're having to deal with things as insignificant as that, as there's gang warfare going on in the city, as there's autonomous zones set up. Maybe if I declared First Avenue an autonomous zone, then maybe I wouldn't be responsible for the Ubers or something. Who knows?
Right.
But it's there's some tough cookies there, and they make it difficult to operate. Let me tell you.
Well, you mentioned earlier about the personal safety issues, crime issues that's going on in Minneapolis. How much of that, Greg, is a real concern versus perception? And I know it changes over time, but right now there's someone who's looking at the schedule of the Minnesota Twins, and they see there's a game at Target Field in July, and I like to go, but I don't know about going downtown. And whereas I used to go and have a drink, a beer and something before the game, I don't know about that either. What is going on as far as crime and safety is concerned, and how much of it is perception versus reality, Greg?
Well, it's certainly a combination. There's crime in Minneapolis. There's crime in downtown. There's crime in uptown. There's crime in Dinkytown. But the perception makes it far worse. I'll certainly admit to that. And the thing is, if you're going downtown, if you go to any big city, there's going to be crime. Look, Minneapolis needs to get serious. There's way too much of it. I mean, you look at statistics, it's way up. It needs to come down. We need to get a handle on it. The city needs to get a handle on it. But when you look at perception is an entirely different matter. And the downtown council, who I'm not a huge fan of downtown, I don't think they support their businesses, but they've done a study, which is interesting, the last few years on perception of safety. And since 2008, when I signed a lease to go into or 2018 rather, when I signed a lease to go into my space on First Avenue, the perception has went down year by year. And I'm really curious what this year's is going to be, but I can only assume it's what the lowest on record. But if you're going downtown, you got to, or any big city, you got to be a little bit smart, right? Park in a well-lit area. Maybe take an Uber downtown. Don't park a mile away and walk back at 3 a.m. Bring a friend with. When you're walking, watch around you. Don't be looking at your $1,000 iPhone that's going to be a target to the thieves. Put your phone in your pocket. Be aware of your surroundings, and be smart. A lot of these victims you're seeing right now, like Dinkytown, there's a significant amount of crime right now in Dinkytown, maybe more than anywhere else in the city. And it's the college students walking, 3 blocks off the main drag going home on their phone, and their purse gets snatched, their phone gets snatched, and maybe they get assaulted in the process. So that's where you're seeing a lot of this stuff happening. So you can go downtown and you can be safe. You just got to be a little smart. Again, Uber downtown, stay with your friends, be aware of your surroundings, and you'll be fine. And, not to agree with what certain council members down there say, but, even with the high amount of crime right now, statistically, your chances of being a victim are very low. And if you, take a little bit of precaution, it's very, very low. So you can go down and have a good time. There's anything you do in life, you can never say there's no risk. And going downtown Minneapolis is certainly no exception. But, the powers that be down there do need to get serious. And if they do, I think they could clean things up pretty quick.
Yeah. Well, in the spirit of full disclosure, I am an inner city person. I love downtown Minneapolis. I go downtown. I never feel unsafe, but I just know some of the things that you referred to and pay attention to my surroundings. In fact, I tell people I like the fact that I have to pay attention to what's going on and things like that. So that's a nice little challenge for me. It's kind of ironic, I would think, Greg, that as crime goes up, and this is across the country in a lot of these cities, police enforcement goes down and the reputation of police goes down. In fact, I can't, it's a challenge for anyone to be a policeman nowadays. I think I heard somewhere where the chief had asked for 1,200 law enforcement officers, and right now we're getting along with about 500. I do know that when my burglar alarm went off at an office of mine, the police say we don't come out anymore. I know I've heard personal stories of them saying we're not going to pursue that criminal because I might end up in prison for 10 years as a result. So what's going on as you see it, Greg? As crime goes up, law enforcement goes down. Have you seen that in downtown Minneapolis, and what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, certainly. It's there's some big problems with policing, and policing is like any profession. Any profession has room to improve, and good improvements, and policing is not exempt from that. There's improvements that can be made to policing in any other profession. With that said, you need the police. You need the police. You need to support the police, and you need to allow them to do their jobs. So the issue is certainly the police are understaffed, and they're making that up through overtime. They're bringing in other agencies. They're bringing in Hennepin County. Really, they should bring in, I think the state needs to get serious, and I think the state patrol should be downtown. You look at other places like New Orleans. For a number of years, they had the Louisiana State Police on Bourbon Street every weekend. And I think something like that needs to be done downtown. Downtown needs to be the economic engine of the state. And it needs safety and security to do that. But what you're seeing with these police down there, you have the staffing, which is a problem. But the big problem you have is they're afraid to do their job. to a certain extent, they're not allowed to do their job. They're stripped of all the tools that they need to do their job. But then secondly, sometimes they're afraid of doing their jobs. Sometimes police need to do unattractive things in the course of keeping law and order. And if doing an unattractive thing means they're going to lose their job or maybe end up in prison, that's a problem. That's really a problem. And in a civilized society, you protect your protectors, and that really is something that needs to be done here. Because again, the police in Minneapolis, by and large, are good people, and they want a safe, vibrant city for the residents there. But there's some people in Minneapolis and people that go to Minneapolis that just want to do harm and wreak havoc on the city. And the police right now, they don't feel like they have the support of the city to be able to go out and do their job. So when you're in a situation like that, where A, you're understaffed, and B, the officers that remain are afraid to do their jobs for fear of getting fired or prosecuted, unfortunately, it's a downward spiral. So there's just a whole host of changes that need to be made, from staffing to policy to even protections from prosecutions for some of this stuff. So we'll see what happens, but it's the city needs to be the driving force, and maybe a little bit from the state, but the city and state need to work together, and they need to get a solution to those problems.
So, Greg, I think you make a good case on the one side for the situation the police are in. Is there in a room? How do we come together with those who see these videos on cell phones and people dying, and it really strikes at their hearts, and they keep seeing it over and over and over? What do you say to that side of the issues? And then how do we come together as people who all care about this city and this country? How do we come together and solve these issues, if that's possible?
Yeah, well, again, policing, like any other profession, has room for improvement. There's no doubt about it. And like any profession, there's bad actors in the profession. There certainly is. And some of the videos people see are troubling. But one video I don't think represents an entire profession with millions of people in it. But certainly you have the flip side. When you have 6-year-old kids getting hit by stray bullets on the street, you see those pictures. Where's the protests over that? You have a 21-year-old college student a few hours before his graduation getting struck by a bullet and dying, being one of 10 people hit in front of Monarch downtown. Those videos are tragic too. So you really got to weigh everything out, and it takes a community. It really takes a community, and the community needs to get involved. I think the community needs to come out and protest every shooting. At the end of the day, a life is a life, and whether a life is lost from an officer or a life is lost from a gang member, at the end of the day, a life is lost. And I think every shooting should be protested. And the community needs to take their streets back. The community members, they know who's doing this. They know who these, what the police call trigger men are. And they need to go out there, and those people need to be taken off the streets. And, I do think people that want to go out and shoot a gun at somebody, I think they need to go to jail or they need to go to prison. I mean, this whole catch and release thing is really troubling. If you want to walk around downtown or anywhere with a gun and shoot the gun at a crowd of people, well, that's a problem, and you need to have a consequence for doing that. And until you do, it's going to be a tough road down there.
Yeah, you've been talking about basically leadership in the city of Minneapolis, and you hit on something earlier. What I found, just like you say, people in the community know who the people out there that's doing this, In fact, I'm just amazed that whenever I read about one of these articles in the local paper here, I talk to people in the community, and the detailed information they have about the people and everything is just amazing to me. You did mention, and I talked to the audience briefly about this, the whole situation down at the Monarch nightclub where 10 people were shot and 2 killed, including a soon-to-be college graduate. He'll be graduated, what's going to graduate the next day. Your establishment is on that same block. I think you're across the street from
Right
it.
across the street.
And you can give us a little intelligence on what goes on down there. I think you got some specific information about the particular bar we're talking about. Tell us a little bit about that particular bar and how it's like having an establishment across the street from it, and what type of issues and concerns does that give you as a business owner down there?
Well, that incident was entirely gang related, and it's troubling. And certain establishments down there, they want to cater to that clientele, and unfortunately, that clientele has weapons. They like to fight. Just the weekend before that, we do some private security and some in house, and the weekend before the shooting at Monarch, there was a 40-person fight at the end of the night coming out of their establishment that ended up at the front door of mine. And my private security said, "Look, we're not doing this. It ain't worth the money. We're going somewhere else." And it's really disappointing when I'm getting citations because the city doesn't like where an Uber drops somebody off, but yet we have businesses downtown that are catering to gangs, bringing those people downtown to shoot and everything else. And the shooter, there were 2 shooters in that deal, but one of the shooters was out on bond from doing the exact same thing in 2019 in front of Pizza Luce. He shot at a group of people, or he shot at a person, hit a bystander, same thing. He was out on bail from that. In between those 2 shootings, he was in a car chase with Minneapolis police. So at some point, it's like, why are these people on the street? How many chances do they get, particularly with violent crimes of this sort? So it's pretty troubling.
Yeah, and well, here's the thing. When you talk to people in law enforcement, let's say about a place like the Monarch, where they know it's a gang hangout, as you allege, and they know there's going to be some things going on there. Are they taking any extra steps, or is it just at the point now, once again, where given the duress they are under, they figure they aren't going to put their lives on the line? How is law enforcement? I mean, they know about this. The city people know about this. Why is nothing being done, Greg, in your opinion?
Well, that's the $1 million question. I think it comes down to politics. It comes down to politics, and it comes down to law enforcement being able to do their jobs. But part of the issue is the criminals have learned that they're not scared of the police anymore. One thing that was unique a little bit about the Monarch shooting is I believe they had an off-duty officer working there, and the Monarch is right around the corner from the 1st precinct. Mm-hmm. So, the criminals aren't even scared of the police anymore. And that's a real troubling thing once you've gotten to that point. I used to hear stories just a few years ago from the south side of Chicago, basically saying that the criminals aren't scared of the cops anymore. It's the other way around. And unfortunately, I see Minneapolis is heading in that direction to the extent it's not there right now.
Yeah, we'll have another get together, Greg, where we talk about the trends here in Minneapolis and look at around the country, and Chicago and Baltimore and DC and Seattle, Portland, LA, San Diego, and just look at similar situations and what they have in common. We'll touch on that subject sometime in the very near future. And here's the thing, and you hit on it. Criminals aren't afraid of the police anymore. I mean, it's dangerous driving in some of these areas. People are not stopping for stop signs. They're not stopping for red lights. In fact, you're in danger if you stop for a red light, and so it's just crazy what's going on around here. So Greg, what do we need to do to improve things here? Well, let's deal with one area at a time. First and foremost, what needs to be done to start rebuilding these businesses, and if possible, at least get you back to where you were a while ago? And we really want to, because business, you have to constantly improve and grow revenues and things like that. What are some of the steps we need to do to help business owners like you downtown, and you want people to come in, feel safe, have a good time, and let's face it, spend some money? What needs to be done?
Well, I think right off the bat, there needs to be a very visible police presence downtown, and in all the areas. I keep saying downtown because that's where my business is, but I think the hardest hit area of this whole issue is uptown. If you've driven through uptown lately, that was always kind of the trendy, vibrant area of town. Right now, that whole thing's boarded up. Downtown, you drive through it, it doesn't, to the naked eye, it don't look too bad. But uptown is really in rough shape. But I think some of these commercial districts that employ a lot of people, generate a lot of tax revenue, I think there needs to be a very visible presence. I understand there's more to solving crime, particularly long-term, than police. But it's not an either or. But in the short term, there needs to be a very visible presence of officers saturating the area so people can come downtown and feel safe. Because when it comes to nightlife, and I'm speaking more for nightlife than anything because that's my business. I understand there's a very significant amount of the economy downtown that is separate, but still needs safety. Obviously, the offices and all that. But when it comes to nightlife, we're in a metropolitan statistical area here, about 3.2 million people, and a very financially successful statistical area too at that. And there's no arguing that downtown Minneapolis, and the Warehouse District in particular, is the cultural center of the region. And when people say, "Hey, we're going downtown, we're celebrating a birthday," they're not asking, "Well, you going downtown Wayzata? You going downtown St. Paul? What downtown?" You're going downtown Minneapolis, right? Because that's where the action is. So we need people to feel safe going downtown and spending money, going to a Twins game, hopefully watching them win, and then go to work on Monday and say, "Gosh, I went downtown and we had a great time. We were safe. There was a good law enforcement presence down there." And that's what we need right off the bat. I understand there's more to it that needs to be worked on, but we need a long-term plan, but we need a short-term plan where we just really take it serious, and we're going to make it safe, bring the vibrancy back downtown, and that's step number one. And that would really, really help. Certainly there's some longer term things too, as far as business regulation. They need to let businesses do their thing there. They need to back off a little bit, but right now with the lack of business, there's really nothing to regulate. If there's no Ubers dropping people off, they can't be citing businesses because right. Ubers are missing right now. They're missing in action. So.
Right. Now, I know you talked about regulations. I know one of the ideas that's been floated out there that we changed the bars and restaurant closing time to allow them to stay open till 4 a.m. And that would help. By the way, a little side story, and I have to get in my little side stories here because, hey, I'm the host, and that's one of my privileges. When I first moved to Minneapolis and I found out that the bars were closing at 1 a.m., I'm like, what? And where we're from, we didn't go out till midnight. But here's the thing, Greg. Now that I'm this age, anything that starts after 7 p.m., I'm like, why are they starting so late? So that's just the evolution of life and things like that. But tell me about this 4 a.m. closing that you think would be very useful and make your case, before the public and all the legislators and things, people out there who would help get this done?
Yeah, I think would be a great thing to do. That's something that I had proposed maybe 6-8 months ago, and it didn't go anywhere. And I was told by everybody that this legislative session that they had their hands full, which, as we're here a day before, hours before the government shuts down and they're still waiting to finalize the budget, I guess there might have been some truth to that. But, my theory was if the governor can unilaterally dial back the closing time to 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, why don't we do 4? Let's do 4 a.m. We did it for the Super Bowls. We did it for the political conventions. And I think that would be a great thing. Much like the 2 o'clock, when they went to 2 o'clock, that was not it was a statewide matter, but each city had to individually opt in, and that was at their discretion. So I'm not saying, Edina is going to have a 4 a.m. bar close. They're not. But for downtown St. Paul, downtown Minneapolis, it'd bring a little more vibrancy. And I think it would be a great thing if it's good for the Super Bowl. Why isn't it good for every week? Because there were no issues with it. And, some of my other locations, we serve a lot later, and, it helps us employ a little bit more, a few more people. We pay more in sales taxes. Downtown Minneapolis has one of the highest sales taxes in the state. Everybody's used to the regular sales tax. Well, then there's an additional sales tax on alcoholic beverages. Then there's several additional sales taxes for being in Minneapolis and even particular districts like the warehouse districts. So, and I'll tell you, financially, the bars and restaurants down there were hurt very bad. And to the ones that survived, just because they were able to reopen their doors, they probably pulled every penny that they could from anywhere they could get it to be able to do that. And, this might help make some people whole or a little bit closer to it. So, that's something that we'll continue to push. I'm told that next year is the year where things of that sort will be considered. And, we'll just see what kind of support. I will say I haven't talked to one legislator that has been opposed to it, but I also haven't talked to one legislator that's moved it forward in any way. So we'll see what happens.
Okay, well, to the citizens of Minnesota and Minneapolis, like I say, I'm from a place where the bar stayed open as long as people were there. Mm-hmm. And it's a really nice place to be in. In fact, we had a tradition where we'd go out on Christmas Eve and stay out until Christmas morning. One time I had to go play trombone at the Catholic Church, but that's a whole nother story. Okay, so we got the 4 a.m. closing, which would help generate more revenues. Is there any other systemic type of change? Well, we talked about this before. We need to do something about the governor's unilateral emergency powers. I hope they can get something done in that area. Are there any other type of things that you can think of, Greg, that we need to consider? Like I say, not only to correct the current situation, but to prevent something like this from happening in the future?
Well, the governor's emergency powers have been very troubling, and something really needs to be done so that never happens again. It's obviously a Republican Democrat issue, and the Democrats supported it. Obviously, if the roles were reversed, they probably wouldn't have liked it so much. But the idea of one person having that much power that can't be challenged is very troubling, and that really does need to be looked at. But beyond that, we need to keep regulation in check. We need to keep taxes in check, and we need people to feel safe. And Minneapolis, one of the things that I found out when I was after I already had a lease signed in Minneapolis, it was the only place in the country where you can find 3 stadiums in the same downtown area. There's nowhere else you can find that. The University of Minnesota, I believe, is the 6th biggest university in the country, and that's right adjacent to downtown or in in the city there, and the number of Fortune 500 companies in Minneapolis and the region. You can go down a checklist of things that Minneapolis it just has so much potential. I mean, it's unbelievable how much potential that it has. But we need some leadership down there. We need it to be safe. We need to take the streets back, control regulation, keep the taxes in check, and Minneapolis can thrive. It can thrive again, and I think it will. But again, it's going to take some leadership, and it's a little out of control. There needs to be a little bit of civility there. We saw a couple days ago they held a council member hostage. You see the council member they held hostage?
Yeah, I saw that.
Did they let her go, or is she still there?
I think they let her go, and after she signed the little petition or whatever they wanted her to sign, and she said she did it under duress, and it's just a lot of crazy things going on here nowadays.
I think she asked for them to have Chipotle delivered while she was held hostage. Did they ever deliver her any food while they held her hostage?
I hadn't heard that part of it. But it's the modern, what should I say, young people way of eating nowadays. As you probably are aware, sit-down restaurants are going out the window, and you got to have these environmental conscious menus, and it can't be sit-down. So it doesn't surprise me that they wanted Chipotle. She wanted Chipotle. So tell me, you mentioned some in this area, but the people, how do we tell something to the people living in the suburbs? You told them how to be safe. You told them the fun they can have at Twins games and enjoy themselves. Is there anything else we want to say to our, let's say, well, not only just suburbanite friends, but any people that want to come down and enjoy all the great mom and pop restaurants? That's one of the things I like about the inner city. They got mom and pop family restaurants. It's not all these chain restaurants, because I'm not a big chain restaurant fan. But what can we tell people to even entice them more to help us get back to normal downtown?
Well, I think we got to remember, July 5th, the Twins go back to full capacity, and maybe once they see 50,000 people in the stands, maybe they'll start winning. Who knows? But either way, when you can get one of those Kazmierik's hot dogs at the game, that's what it's all about, anyways. Sometimes right? But you can't be afraid. Look, you can't live your life in fear. But you got to be smart anywhere you go. If you go to New Orleans, if you go to Miami, if you go to Nashville, if you go to Las Vegas, crime happens everywhere. Crime happens in the suburbs. What we've been seeing, Lakeville, Woodbury. So you just got to be smart, but you can't be afraid. You can't live your life in fear, because you can't see a Twins game in Woodbury, unfortunately. You can't see a Twins game in Blaine. You can't see a Twins game in Lakeville. So go downtown, have fun. And, just be a little bit smart. Ubers are just so great. You don't have to pay for parking. You don't have to walk. It's a great thing. But if you got to, drive down there, just watch around you. If you're looking at your iPhone texting, that may not be the best thing to do right now. So just be a little bit smart, but you can't be afraid. Minneapolis does have a lot to offer. There's a lot to offer down there. And it is the cultural center of the region. Again, when you say you're going downtown, no follow-up is needed on where you're going.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned earlier that we have 3 professional sports arenas and stadiums downtown. And I tell people, like you brought up, that I think it's the only city in America where that's true. I think what I've loved about Minneapolis, too, is that a lot of the old money was committed and connected to downtown, and they made sure that it was vibrant and safe and things like that. And one thing we talked about, a couple of things we talked about today, just the city of Minneapolis. I've been here basically 40 years, and it just hurts me to see and I'm just going to be straight to the point, what current leadership, where they're leading this metropolitan area, this city, and how it's going downhill relative to income level, relative to crime. And I put that uh, squarely on the desk of our leadership and their way of looking at things. The second thing you mentioned, and small businesses, man. I mean, how can anyone not? Well, I guess when you look around at our leadership, a lot of them has never run a business. A lot of them has been on the government take all their lives, and
Well,
they don't.
if you look at all their Twitters, they're all organizers or activists, is what they
Right.
what they list. So that's a problem.
Right, it is. And I feel sorry for people who do not appreciate that the business of America is business, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's what how I support my family. That's how I put food on the table. That's how I send my children to college and things like that. So I'm unapologetic as far as supporter of businesses. I think that's the foundation of everything. That's where all the money comes from, most of it. And so that's really bothered me to drive through downtown Minneapolis. It looked like a ghost town, even during rush hour. And it's just sad and it's unnecessary. And by the way, this is just an aside. It bothers me that no one is holding China accountable for none of this. Not even our media. No one is. So they have basically killed, responsible for tens of millions of people died, and businesses shutting down across the world, and not one peep from anyone hardly. Every once in a while you hear holding them accountable. And Greg, if you let your dog get out and he bit a person, if you let him get out accidentally, he bit a person, they're going to hold you accountable for that. And I don't know how China's getting away from that. But anyway, that's a whole different.
I think we have a better chance at 1,200 officers in Minneapolis than China being held accountable.
I know it's sad. But
one thing I'll say, you mentioned the importance of businesses downtown, and obviously we both understand that, as I've said, there is more to solving crime than making arrests. Certainly that's a part of it, but there's more to it. And part of it is, as we know, poverty breeds crime, and it's unfortunate. So the way to get out of poverty is to get a job and earn an income. So when you take away businesses, particularly local businesses, if you don't have transportation, you can't get out to the suburbs to get a job. So if you're taking away the businesses in Minneapolis, you're taking away jobs. If you're taking away jobs, you're taking away income and these people's ability to get out of poverty. And now you got more people in poverty and more crime, and it's a downward spiral. So I really hope that the significance and the importance of employment and jobs, which are all created by successful businesses, really becomes a priority in the city soon.
Well, that's a good point. And you've led me to another area here quickly. And we're going to let you go and get some supper here pretty soon, Greg. But I was telling someone I was visiting Delhi here recently. That's normally open to 6 or 7 o'clock at night. And they were shutting down at 2 in the afternoon. And they were upfront with me. The reason they had to shut down because their coworkers was not coming into work because they could make just as much money at home.
Well, I'll tell you, I hear that a lot. And, we're not busy enough yet in Minneapolis. Every week we're getting a little bit busier every week. But unfortunately, we're not even close to where we once was or should be. But so I can't say that's affected us yet. But I know you talk to the suburb people, it is. But kind of along the same lines, like you say, the restaurants. There's a little deli I like to go to in St. Paul, and they're not open on the weekends. And even worse now, though, during the week, you can't get a hot sandwich after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So if you want a hot sandwich, you got to get there for lunch because there's no hot sandwiches for dinner anymore.
Wow. And I should say, too, I've talked to some other business owners in the manufacturing and other areas, and they are desperate for workers. And once again, I think there are some people in leadership, and this on the national level also, who would rather pay people to stay at home and do anything. And I guess it's, once again, you can connect a lot of dots to this, but there's this modern money theory that says you don't have to work and we'll give you money for free and the government can print money, which of course is leading to a lot of the issues we're having with the current inflation, and that's not looking too good over the horizon. So a lot of things going on here. I think, Greg, you were a good person to delve into many of these issues, to talk how we got here, how we're going to get out of it, the reasoning behind it. I think our current leadership, just the way they think, man, it's just their point of view. And a lot of these issues, as long as we electing these people, it's not going to get solved. In fact, it's going to get worse. And the sad part about it, and just talking to, because I know all kinds of people, a lot of people don't make that connection. And I think they're going to still keep voting the same way. We're going to still keep getting the same kind of leadership. And the sad part about it, and I know this, is they're going to keep driving Minneapolis and the Twin Cities down in the ground until it's just ridiculous. And I mentioned the concern for small business. My personal concern, and you touched on it, when we have 3-year-olds getting shot. And I think one of the young girls died. And the thing about it, she was a daughter of a young man that went to school with my son at Patrick Henry High School, I understand. Another one was the granddaughter of someone I met at a vigil for another gun violence incidents. And so these things are not just the statistics and news stories. These things are, I can put a face on just about all of these issues. So really, Greg, once again, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience and things in the bar and entertainment industry, your experience in dealing with the leadership here in Minneapolis and Minnesota compared to other places in the country. And all I can say is that these are issues that we all care for. Let's keep fighting for them. Let's keep challenging the other side, but they can be kind of scary sometimes too.
Maybe if you do, they'll hold you hostage.
Yeah, I know. Or they'll ruin your life in another kind of way. It's kind of sad where we're at nowadays. But hey, I have faith and confidence that we're going to figure this stuff out. And let's just keep talking to our citizens and people and get them to keep thinking. Keep reading and get them to understand how difficult it is to really figure out what's really going on. If you're just reading the newspaper and coming home, listen to the evening news every evening, you really don't know exactly what's going on. So once again, Greg, appreciate that. Hope to come down and visit and bring the wife with it and have a beer. Go ahead.
When you do, are you going to ride the bull?
Oh, no. Well, no, Greg, I'm not gonna ride the bull. That's right. You know what? We old school people. I'll put it that way. We have to know when to let it go and leave it to the young people. So I'm one of those old school guys. I'm gonna let that one go and leave it to the young people. I may bring my son down and see can I get him on it. I know I can get my grandson on it. So one of us. We'll ride the bull.
Somebody from the family is getting on the bull.
Somebody from the family will get on the bull, but I guarantee you that somebody from the family would not be me, Greg. So,
all right.
So thanks a lot, and we'll be talking soon, and we hope to have you back on once business pick up and everything is getting back to somewhat normal in downtown Minneapolis. Thanks again, Greg.